It's very cool to say this because we haven't been able to do this before. This is the Pennsylvania Association of Broadcasters award-winning Just Start the Conversation podcast. It's brought to you by St. Luke's Penn Foundation. I'm your host, Kevin Crockett. Happy as always to be back once again to do this thing with you. It is a mental health podcast, and we have taken a lot of different paths on this show so far, and excited to take another one today. As always, with my partner in crime, Amie Allanson Dundon. Amie, how are we, my friend?
I'm doing well, Crockett. To be able to say we're award winners, I feel like a superstar.
They're going to put one of the stars right out on the sidewalk for us.
I need a star. We need stars on like the St. Luke's Walk of Fame.
Who's the star person at St. Luke's? We got to get an email with them.
Yeah.
No, but in all seriousness, a serious show. We always like to start just because we're pals, so we like to start with a little banter there. But a serious conversation ahead of us today with another pal of ours that I've just gotten to meet and I'm excited to talk to today. Nicole Martin, who is the senior manager and advanced practitioners at St. Luke's, is joining us today. Our discussion is going to be about panic disorder. Nicole, thank you for joining us. We appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me.
Excellent. We'll see if we can get your name on the star too. We haven't ruled that out. We'll talk about it.
I deserve a star.
There we go. That's all right.
It's the theme of the day.
Yeah.
That's what we want. That's what we want. We want a little confidence here.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us. We're excited to talk to you today. And so I guess the best place to start as we're getting ready to discuss panic disorder is with you, Nicole, here. So what is panic disorder and how does it differ from having an occasional panic attack for someone?
So a panic attack is typically like a very discrete episode of this sudden, abrupt onset of fear, of dread, of some somatic complaints like chest pain, shortness of breath, dizziness, lightheadedness, tingling in your mouth, hyperventilation, things like that. Kind of comes on out of nowhere. And it typically can last anywhere from minutes up to an hour. And sometimes it never happens again. It could be just an isolated event, a one-time event in your life, and then it just goes away, and you never know why.
Yeah.
And it's just something. A panic disorder is more of a chronic condition. So panic disorder is typically something that is diagnosed in somebody that experiences multiple attacks, and many times fears what the next attack is going to look like. Why are they getting these attacks? They try to really delve into it deeply to try to figure out what's happening. And sometimes they actually think they're physically ill, like they're having a heart attack or, there's something really mechanically wrong with them. So there is a difference in just a one-time attack or a 1 in every 6-year attack versus somebody that experiences multiple attacks over a shorter period of time and spends a lot of time kind of perseverating over, oh my gosh, I'm going to have another one of these attacks, and when is it going to be, and how long is it going to last? And typically a panic disorder is a diagnosis. It's a psychiatric medical diagnosis that many times comes along with other things like depression or anxiety. And, we usually see the onset of that disorder diagnosed in about your mid-20s, and we see it more often in females than males. Yay for us. So, it's, that's really the big difference between those two.
Amie, about your collaboration a little bit with Nicole here, the point where you two kind of collaborate and see that perhaps as we talk about maybe, some of the things that depression was mentioned, anxiety was mentioned, and now all of a sudden we're seeing that perhaps this isn't just a one and done kind of as Nicole said with a panic attack. This is a situation where we're seeing consistently that this may be a panic disorder. Just the collaboration between you two, where does that start when you have a patient that on either end, I suppose, that you're seeing a panic disorder with?
So the dialogue goes both ways. So it could start with an advanced practitioner in Nicole's group. It could start with a therapist in my group. I might have somebody that I'm treating with clinical psychotherapy that has maybe had 1 or 2 panic attacks, and all of a sudden it's becoming a more regular thing, to the point where I think maybe we need to talk to a provider, a psychiatrist, or an advanced practitioner about medications and adding a medication to the psychotherapy. Or a primary care doc could reach out to our advanced practitioners or our psychiatrists and say, I'm not comfortable managing a medication for panic disorder. I'd like you guys to take that take the wheel on that medication. So it's kind of a three-way triangular team between the primary care doc, the psychiatric advanced practitioner or psychiatrist, and the clinical therapist. And it might be somebody that's coming in for med management, isn't in therapy, and Nikki's team might say, you know what, I really do think that a round of, cognitive behavioral therapy or maybe even EMDR, if there's some sort of trauma or a specific phobia that we can help that is maybe amplifying these panic attacks. And we work together as a team. Sometimes medication is super helpful. Sometimes it's not needed, but it would really be, Nikki's team would come in because as advanced practitioners, they can prescribe medication.
Nikki, I'm curious if you could piggyback just a little bit off of what Amie said there. Do you feel like there was anything that you would have added on there with that, just in terms of your collaboration with the two of you in particular?
Not necessarily. I think, honestly, sometimes we as providers need to kind of really dig deep into these events with these patients to really truly identify what they are. Sometimes our patients will come in to us about something completely different or completely irrelevant, and we'll get kind of conversating, and then before you know it, they'll say, oh, you know what, I had this event, this happened to me, and I don't know what happened, but it didn't feel good and I didn't like it. And sometimes, we'll then identify that, and then we'll say, okay, well, we'll try to kind of investigate that a little further to see, would they benefit from, a trial of a medication, or would they benefit from scheduling an appointment with a therapist and allowing the therapist to dig it down into that a little bit. So I agree with Amie in what she said, saying that this is kind of like a triad. This is a patient, a provider, and a therapist. And it's up to the three of us to really decide what is going on and how exactly do we want to treat it? What's our next step in helping this patient, feel better?
Yeah, and I would just add to that very often people don't know that they're having a panic attack when they're having a panic attack. Mm-hmm. Very often we see folks present to our emergency departments thinking that very often that they're having a cardiac issue, mm-hmm. and because it can seem very similar if you're somebody that hasn't had panic attacks in the past, or this is a new onset. And even if not, they're very frightening, and they're very real. So it's not, this is something that we can't say, oh, this is all in your head. It's not. Panic attacks, you physically are sweating. Your heart is pounding out of your chest. Your blood pressure may be high. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes people have specific panic attacks in specific with triggers, maybe when driving, maybe when they hear a loud noise, maybe something that they've had, maybe they were in a car accident years ago, and every time they're driving on a certain road, they're having panic attacks. So oftentimes people will present to the ED because they don't know what else to do, and it's so scary. So the ED will often then send people our way too, to say, you know what, we really need to figure out what this is. And when we unpack it, it may have presented as, oh, I was just going through financial hardship, or I'm having marital stress, or I'm really struggling caretaking a family member. And all of those stressors just build up, and out of the blue, I'm having an episode that I thought was a heart attack, and it really was an anxiety attack, and it wasn't medical.
You kind of took right where I was going with that, Amie. You picked up right where Nikki was. Nikki, a word you used was investigation. And I think especially for somebody who is experiencing something like this for the first time, I mean, obviously it's scary in and of itself. But one of the things that Amie and I talk about sometimes in this podcast as we talk to maybe going and seeing your family doctor first, or going that kind of route. The first time, you guys have said it feels like a heart attack. I guess the question I'm asking is, when in doubt, are we treating this like a heart attack? Is this kind of the general kind of better safe than sorry kind of a thing? Because I feel like for a first time, especially, you mentioned in your, usually in your 20s that this sort of thing maybe is going to start creeping up on you. I'm just curious, because that's got to be, you don't really know what to do in that situation if you never had it happen before, right?
Sure. And, a lot of diagnoses in psychiatry are almost a diagnosis of exclusion. So, things that mimic a heart attack obviously you want to rule out a heart attack. So, these patients may find themselves in the emergency room. They may even find themselves hospitalized and going through a whole bunch of gambit of testing, cardiac testing and stress testing, EKGs, all this kind of stuff. MRIs, CAT scans of the head, it doesn't matter. We need to rule out the big bad stuff before we can come back and we can safely say, you know what, we think that you just had a panic attack. And honestly, I have to be very transparent. Patients don't like to hear that. They want to be able to put the finger on exactly what it was that caused those symptoms. And so when you say to a patient, we've ruled out the big bad stuff, we think you had a panic attack, they don't want to hear that. That's scary to them because to them, that was physically, they felt something physically. There was physically something wrong. There's no way this could have been in my head. And so it can be a very contentious conversation with your patients and trying to really help them understand physically what their body just went through. So yeah, it can be quite challenging. You have to kind of rule out the big bad stuff first.
That is fascinating. Amie, to kind of pivot to you on that, because you would almost think that perhaps, as Nikki called it, like the big bad wolves that are out there, that it could be, you would almost think that perhaps the knowledge of knowing that this is, whether it was a heart attack or whatever it might be, this is what I had, this is kind of what I can do to, like, there's an actual physical element almost that feels like it's there. This is a mental element that feels like it's there for folks. Do you think that's where I was fascinated by Nikki's explanation there of almost kind of the uncertainty, how she says, when I think you had a panic attack, people are kind of like, oh no, like that's because there's just that level of not sure exactly what got me here, do you think?
Yeah, it's very unsettling to have a condition that doesn't have a very understood, socially accepted protocol for treatment. And if I have a heart attack, we just had a recent episode with Bill from Cardiac Rehab. I know what I'm going to do to rehab, and I know how many weeks I'm going to be in cardiac rehab, and I know what the diet change has to be. And oftentimes if we say, you had a panic attack, it's, well, what do we do about that? Because we don't really talk about that. Now, I think it can also be scary to be diagnosed with panic disorder, right? Because we don't have a lot of social support. I can go to my coworkers and say I'm going to be out of work because I had a heart attack, and people will send flowers, and people will, bake lasagna and love lasagna, and people will bring that to you. But if I say I have panic disorder or I had a panic attack, nobody sends flowers and nobody brings lasagna, and they're like, oh.
Really? You can't come to work because
Right.
you had a panic attack?
Yeah. You're going to be out of work for a panic attack? What's going on? It's very, we've come a long way, but we're not there yet. So it's a difficult diagnosis because you don't get the kind of support that you generally get when the big bad stuff shows up.
Yeah. There's not a whole lot of, empathy surrounding that explanation of why you weren't able to conduct your everyday, routine because you had a panic attack. People downplay that. But unless you physically have experienced a panic attack yourself, I don't think people can understand the debilitating feeling, the dread. And I'm speaking from experience, and I think you can all sense that it is the most disabling feeling somebody could even ever feel. And so I do think that, sometimes society just lacks compassion towards mental health conditions. And so with that, I would say, we have to be cognizant of mental health disorders, and we have to be accepting of that. And we have to be able to be empathetic towards patients that experience those episodes.
Yeah, for sure. And empathetic to our family members that are experiencing it. Sometimes even family members can kind of say, well, oh, it wasn't a heart attack. It wasn't anything bad. Let's get back to life here, and not give people the grace to kind of roll back in gracefully and figure out a plan. And for women, I mean, Nikki mentioned earlier that this is more prevalent in the female gender. women tend to push through more without saying anything than men. So women may have panic attacks 3, 4, 5, 6 before they ever even say anything to anyone. It's because that's just the truth.
Yeah.
You know, that word we've used quite a bit on this podcast is stigma. Things that have that stigma around them. It certainly feels like that's what we're kind of talking about here with people's reaction, the outside reaction, your friends or family reacting to you having a panic attack, and them kind of being like, okay, to your point, all right, well, there's tomorrow. We can get back to it. But of course, it's more than that. I want to talk about how we go about treating this. Okay, we've got our diagnosis. We know where we're going. Psychotherapeutic approaches that are perhaps most effective in this process. Because again, as we talk about, it's Amie, we've alluded to this before. You break an arm. We mentioned the heart attack. It's very clearly, here's what I have to do, cardiac rehab. When we talked about the heart attack, to your point that you made, for some people, it might be kind of learning on the fly here with this. So psychotherapeutic approaches that are most effective. Amie, I'll go ahead and start with you on this one. Just we've got our diagnosis. Here we are. Where are we going from here?
Psychotherapy is very, very successful for panic disorder and panic attacks. There's a myriad of ingredients in the panic disorder cocktail to treat this. DBT, dialectical behavior therapy, is one of my favorites, specifically the modules in DBT that use emotion regulation techniques. There are some really quick, easy skills we can teach people that are feeling a panic attack coming on or having one to help regulate their emotions. Therapy is very much about mindfulness and doing things that are going to help you move your brain away from sitting in the fear to rescuing yourself from out of the middle of that kind of fire event and getting yourself back to a more calm space. So things like temperature. If somebody is having an attack and they're in a place with an ice cube, we tell them to get an ice cube and hold it in their fists until it melts. The cold of the ice cube, we know that temperature regulates emotion or re-regulates emotion. So therapy is going to give many, many, many of those skills, and it's also going to help you unpack the root of what's causing the anxiety. Is it trauma that has to be unpacked that's getting triggered by something we're not aware of? Is it compounded stress? Is it vicarious trauma that it's coming out a different way for you? So cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavior therapy, looking at our cognitive distortions, understanding what those messages are that I'm giving myself that are making me scared, and changing that narrative. And we've talked about CBT a lot on this podcast. But I really do think that mindfulness and emotion regulation skills, coupled with some trauma work and some CBT, you could only need 10, 12 sessions. It doesn't necessarily mean you need to be in clinical therapy for years. That's not what this is about. We can teach some skills that will get you to a much better place fairly quickly.
Nikki, I kind of want to piggyback off of that one with the correlation between therapy and medication working together. Amie had mentioned I think that's a really fascinating one, the ice cube in the hand, that temperature can kind of help you. Something that I'm sure, listen, if you just had your first panic attack and I'm sure somebody said to you, hey, put an ice cube in your hand, they would probably be like, huh?
What?
Right.
So as we're talking about techniques and therapy, the role that medication plays in helping you combine the therapy and medication in treating a panic disorder.
Yeah, so typically, I tend to be a very conservative practitioner. So I like to go the conservative route first. Most of the time that works fairly well, especially in somebody that may have experienced 1 or 2 attacks. But if you have somebody that has panic disorder, and again, remembering they typically have a comorbid psychiatric condition like depression or anxiety, many times the medication therapy, in addition to the psychotherapy, is extremely effective. The medications that we have for these conditions also have been around for a really long time. They have a really good safety profile. They're very cost effective. And honestly, they work really well. So, if you have somebody that you've, done therapy with on multiple occasions, and whether it's they're not engaged or they're not responding to the techniques that you've taught them, then it might be time to introduce medication. I would not introduce medicine to somebody who had one solitary attack. I certainly would try to help them develop some, self-modulating techniques that helps to calm themselves down or to understand what's physically happening in their body rather than just putting them on a medication. They tend to have more side effects than therapeutic effectiveness from medications if they've just had one event. So, I think it really comes down to how many attacks have these patients had, how engaged are they in their treatment? Do they want to try some of these techniques? Some people would be like, I'm not sticking an ice cube in my hand and letting it melt all over the floor. If they're not engaged, I don't know if they're going to have, they're going to see effective treatment with taking medication either. Because I think a lot of it, like Amie said, is mind over matter.
You have to want to do it. You have to. Therapy is effective if you're going to put the work into it.
We've mentioned depression and anxiety, the lifestyle that perhaps you're living, whether you're getting your sleep, whether you're, how much maybe you're physically active, caffeine, things of that nature. Amie, I'll kickstart with you here. The lifestyle factors and the role that they can play in a panic attack.
Oh, huge. So if you're not getting good sleep, your panic disorder or panic attacks are going to be amplified. And by good sleep, 7 solid hours a night, right? Uninterrupted. So work on your sleep hygiene because that's going to help your anxiety and depression, which is then going to help your panic, right? Also, screen time. I feel like it doesn't matter what episode we do, Crockett, we come back to too much screen time and overstimulating your brain with things, perhaps video games that are violent or video games that are jarring and overstimulating. Certainly not going to help a panic disorder. Now, you're going to have people argue that and say, oh no, playing video games calms me down. It's the cumulative amount of screen time and what we're exposing ourselves to on the screen. Sure, I'll play Wordle, and that's a stress relief for me. But that's not 4 straight hours of a violent video game, right? Very, very different arguments. I'll argue that one with patients till the cows come home.
I don't know, man. When you just got one guest left, though, it can get tense.
I know. It can get a little stressful. Yeah. Right. If you're having panic attacks over Wordle, then call me. So I think lifestyle, diet, Monster drink. Okay. I don't want Monster to sue us, so I don't mean Monster specifically. But energy drinks that are rich in caffeine, pots and pots of caffeinated coffee, probably not wise.
2-liter bottles of soda.
Yeah.
No.
Lots of people are doing that, though.
Yeah, because they feel like they need an extra boost of energy throughout their day to kind of get all their activities done. So they drink all this stuff and they eat all this weird thing and stuff, and honestly it's no good for you. It's no good for you at all. Nothing good ever comes of energy drinks and tons of bad food.
I'm curious because it's and I don't mean to pin anybody in any particular age bracket here, but we come back to one of the original points that this might start for you in your 20s. Nikki, I want to talk a little bit about I think we all at some point in our life feel a little untouchable. Feel like we can kind of do whatever we want before something finally catches up to us. Panic attacks can have an onset at any point in your life. But as we're talking about some of these lifestyle factors, and we talk about the 20s maybe being the place that starts, is there an element of that to it? Do you think that it's just especially when you have that first one, that perhaps maybe you don't realize how much you've really got going on until something like this hits you?
I think the younger we are, the more we think we can handle. You think you can conquer the world because you're 25 and you just got your first job and you're making a decent income and, everything is great. You got money in the bank. You've got a great relationship. Everything's going well, but yet you're not taking care of yourself. You're sleeping 3.5 hours a night. You're eating terribly. You're drinking tons of coffee because you got 6 projects going on at the same time. You used to like to exercise, but you don't have time for that anymore. So there's a lot of things I think that life just interferes and gets in the way. And I think that's where we need to pause and we need to take a step back and we need to say, okay, I need to take better care of myself. What do I have to do that? Because something isn't right here. I never experienced this before. And now all of a sudden I'm experiencing this. So something's got to give. And that's when you need to take a step back and really take a look at things. As Amie mentioned, 7 hours of solid sleep is important. You must have it, no matter what age you are. And that means taking the 30 minutes before you're ready to finally lay down and go to bed to just be at peace, to be calm. No screen time. Maybe read a book, journal, do something relaxing. Don't exercise before you go to bed. Don't take a shower before you go to bed. All those things are very stimulating, and they will affect your ability to get a good, solid night's rest, including alcohol. People like to drink before they go to bed. Not a good idea, especially in somebody that has anxiety and panic disorders.
I'm curious, though, as you give those, my job here a lot as the host is to counterpoint. If you're one of those people that is trying to go about reading and taking it easy before bed, and then all of a sudden you realize that you're at 10 o'clock, and then you're still hanging out and it's 11 o'clock. And then, Amie, just maybe some techniques that, when you're almost feeling a panic attack come on because you're trying to do those other things and you're trying to help yourself not be so anxious falling asleep, and then you turn the light out and you're staring up at the ceiling. You mentioned the ice in the hand. I think that's really fascinating for someone that feels like maybe perhaps one is coming on. They're trying some of those different things to get themselves relaxed, and we're finding ourselves in a moment. Maybe it's just some techniques that can help people beyond the lifestyle changes a little bit, but really in a moment, how can I help myself?
Mm-hmm. If you're lying in bed, you obviously don't want to get ice cubes and get the bed
the bed all wet. Water bed, who knows?
Right, but you could lay on a heating pad. Right, it's a temperature change. You could do that. You could. I'm a big fan of progressive muscle relaxation, which is where you're kind of closing your eyes and you're starting at the tippy top of your head and going all the way down to your toes, and you're tensing and clenching muscles and holding that, and then releasing it. While you do some deep breathing all the way from the top of your head. Then you do your forehead, you do your ears, you do your nose, you do your jaw, do your whole body. And you're breathing in and you're breathing out and you're feeling what it feels like to clench and tense your muscles. And then you're completely relaxing those and letting them go. If you're focusing on doing progressive muscle relaxation, it's very difficult to be focusing on panic. Our brain can't do those two things at the same time because it takes two different parts of our brain to do those things at once.
Nikki, I see Nikki nodding along with that one. That's a big one.
Because as she's saying this, I'm literally tensing up and letting it go. And honestly, it is such a fantastic technique. It's so simple. It doesn't take a lot of smarts to really do things like that.
Yeah.
And I just don't think we give ourselves enough credit that we can just do simple techniques that really kind of will go a long way.
I'm curious. And I feel like, especially if it's around sleep, that is such a big one. If you can find a way to get your sleep kind of figured out a little bit there, I feel like has to be such a huge one for people who have anxiety. Nikki, some other long-term strategies. Okay. Cause I feel like that's a good one. If now, you're going to go to bed every day. So if I can find something that's going to help me kind of center myself and get relaxed and get into a spot where I don't feel like something's on the onset or something's on the way. Other long-term strategies that people can use if they feel like a panic attack might be on the horizon.
Simple techniques such as deep breathing, meditation, yoga, infrared therapy, things like that are all very simple, just easy things that you can do to really kind of relax your mind. Journaling, like I said earlier, sometimes something that just kind of helps you get whatever's on your mind off your mind, and then you close the journal and it's gone. It just takes it away. So there are some very simple techniques I think people can certainly do more often that would really help alleviate some of these attacks.
I think music therapy can be helpful too. If you're laying in bed and you're someone that likes to listen to music, give yourself 10 minutes of calm, restful, soothing music, whatever that looks like to you. For you, Crockett, it might be Metallica. Maybe not for me, but everybody's going to be different. So it might be classical Beethoven or Bach, or it might be, Pink, or it might be Metallica. Whatever puts you in a happy place, listen to music. And you're a music guy, Crockett, so.
I recommend the soothing sounds of 100.7 LEV. I'm sure
absolutely
we can help you fall asleep every night if you need to. Yes. So we're mentioning listening listeners here. For somebody that feels like this episode is maybe speaking to them in a certain kind of way, and hopefully it that feeling of dread and feeling like a heart attack is coming, Nikki, that you kind of alluded to earlier. Maybe we're sensing that we're a little bit more than just anxious in a situation. For somebody that maybe is hearing this for the first time or who has been experiencing this and is struggling, Nikki, for you, where do people start if they're looking to get this addressed?
I would go right to your primary care doctor or provider. Start there. And if you don't have one, there are multiple clinics available around the area. And you can always call your insurance company. You can get a name of a local provider. And worst case scenario, you can always go to the emergency department. But I really would say that would be the last ditch effort, unless you really feel like there's something medically wrong with you. But certainly starting with your primary care doctor is an appropriate first step.
Ooh, feels like we've touched on a lot of elements that I feel like we hit a lot in this podcast. Start with your primary care doctor, right? But we've addressed stigma around panic disorder. Help your folks out. If you see something going on, check in on them. Be a supportive person, whether that's family, a friend, whatever that might be. I think that's a really good thing and a healthy thing, especially when you're talking about a mental health podcast. Nicole Martin, she is the Senior Manager, Advanced Practitioners at St. Luke's. Thank you for discussing panic disorder with us today. It was a lovely conversation.
Thanks for having me, I should say, not us.
Absolutely. Well, come on back anytime. Amie, thank you for channeling your inner Garfield and your love of lasagna today. That was a really nice element of the show. No, as always, my friend, I appreciate you. This was another great conversation, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's the Just Start the Conversation podcast. It's brought to you by St. Luke's Penn Foundation. For Nicole Martin, for Amie, Allanson, Dundon, I'm Kevin Crockett. On the way out, thank you for checking out the Just Start the Conversation podcast.